we play a game?
Why, yes, I believe we shall.
Oh, I got a live one here.
Live from Little Rock, it's Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love, which is both a live over-the-air radio show, broadcast FM radio show in Little Rock, Central Arkansas area, on 96.5 FM usually. This week we're on both 96.5 and 99.5, and in the coming weeks we'll be on 99.5 only. I'll talk about that more in a little bit. It's due to Wichita Baptist Sports Ball. So they are a partner of the Salem Communications here, and they are important to us, and people like to listen to the sports ball. So every year this time for a few weeks, we make slight adjustments so that everybody gets to go out. As I said, I am Shane Stacks. I'm the host. Thanks so much for listening. I'm a geek at heart, and I love doing this show, and got cool guests today who I'll introduce here in a moment. Again, this is live radio, so if you're listening on Saturday, October 14th at 1 p.m. Central, you can call in at 501-823-0965, or you can tweet me at Shane Plays. That's ShanePlays. And I'll work your questions or comments into the air. Sometimes we get calls, sometimes we don't. That's cool. But if people want to call in, one of the reasons I do this live, first and foremost, I love live talk radio. It's amazing. I love there's an energy to doing live that you don't get when you're doing pre-recorded, and I love the interactivity. But I also love podcasts. I'm a fan of both mediums, which is why this show also goes out as a podcast, and sometimes they'll do special podcasts and that sort of thing. Speaking of Shane Plays, like I said, you can tweet me at Shane Plays, or you can call 501-823-0965. If you're listening to this as the podcast or on Krypton Radio, the show notes for the show are up at shaneplays.com right now. That's ShanePlays.com. You can also keep up with the show and all my other geeky stuff with shaneplays.com. Last week's show is archived on the blog and out on the podcast, and it's replaying now on Krypton Radio, and it's on SoundCloud and all over the place out there, and on YouTube. I put it up on YouTube, but it dovetails nicely into this week's topic, which is going to be OSR role-playing games. And I talked last week, I had the pleasure of talking with Frank Mincer of the D&D Redbox fame, who's also doing a Kickstarter right now for his Imperia campaign setting. So go check that out. Listen to the show, support his setting. And if you love today's topic, you know, I can't see why you wouldn't be interested in what Frank's doing. So make sure to check that stuff out. Like I said, this show does go out as a podcast after a live show, usually 2 or 3 days. Just depends on what's going on in life. But it goes out on the blog at shaneplays.com, iTunes, Google Play Music, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, SoundCloud, and more, including YouTube. And then we're also, last but never, ever, 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 ever least, we are on Krypton Radio. Krypton Radio is sci-fi for your Wi-Fi, kryptonradio.com, where we played on Saturdays and Mondays the week following the live show. Okay, so I'm going to talk about the station change, and then I'm going to introduce my guest. So basically from October 7th through November 11th, we're doing Wichita Baptist football, aka the sports ball. And except for this week, the game is at the same time as my show. So if you want to listen to my show live, then you want to listen in the coming weeks from now, or from next week up to November 11th, you want to listen on 99.5 Faith Talk, which is the sister station to 96.5 FM The Answer, which is my home station. Okay. And then we will replay up through that weekend, November 11th weekend. This show will replay on our home station of 96.5 at 5 p.m. on Sundays. So, yeah, we got to move for sports ball, but we get double play for both me and my guests. So that's cool. So, but this week, just because there's no football, to make things even more confusing, we're just simulcasting on 96.5 and 99.5, since we've already advertised that the show's on 99.5 from October 7th through November 11th. So if you're on 99.5 Faith Talk and you're like, I love me for some Faith Talk, but what the heck is Shane Plays Geek Talk? Well, that's the answer. And it's just a fun, geeky show. I have faith myself. I'm very serious about my faith. This particular show, that's not the topic. But anyway, if so if you're like, wow, this is kind of weird, stick with it. You might like it. And regardless, come November 11th will be the last weekend. Okay, that's enough of that. Time is a predator that stalks us all our lives. especially in radio. So I want to introduce my guest from the Save or Die podcast. That's right, Save or Die podcast. I've got DM Carl and DM Chrispy. Are you guys with me?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. Hey, and Chrispy, when I was talking to him before the show, had some fan noise because he's in Las Vegas and it's hot, and he turned it off. But Chrispy, man, if you get hot, turn your fan back on. I don't want you baking. All right. So I'll leave that up to you. But I do appreciate you, working on the sound quality, but at the same time, I don't want you melting. So, anyway, guys, and I guess just so that you don't talk over each other, I think you're equal co-hosts, but I'm going to let Carl start introducing what is Save or Die. And then, I'll let Chrispy kind of come in after him and add anything that he wants. And folks, we will also be talking today because Carl is heading up the Arkansas RPG Con that you've been hearing advertised on the show for weeks, and it's been all over social media and everything. That's next week, October 21st in Benton. And we will be talking more about that before the first break, just here in a few minutes. But Carl, tell us about Save or Die.
Sure. Save or Die is a podcast about classic Dungeons and Dragons, which covers iterations of Dungeons and Dragons from OD&D, the original box sets, up through Holmes, Moldvay Basic, and Mincer Basic, BECME, that Shane was just talking about a little while ago, called the Red Box.
The Red Box. All right. And Chrispy, you want to add anything to that?
Yeah. Man, it's been around for a very long time. We've been active since, I want to say 2010 at least. And yeah, it's just, now it's a monthly show. So previously it was weekly, it was bi-weekly. Now we're doing it monthly, so we can kind of get back on our feet and sort of figure out where we're going with it. But yeah, we do product reviews. We talk about the history of the game is a big focus for us. We talk about how you can utilize, concepts in your classic D&D game, or even translate those concepts into like 5e or Pathfinder or 4th edition.
Well, I'm an OSR guy before I even ever heard the term OSR. I actually, the first D&D I ever played, I think I played like AD&D once, just kind of as a one-off with some older guys, and they're like, who's this little annoying kid kind of thing. But then I cut my teeth on Moldvay, the basic and expert, which Carl and I played not that long ago at Game Goblins. It was a lot of fun. Carl DM'd a session of that, and we had a lot of fun. But yeah, so I'm old school at heart, that, one hit, you're dead kind of thing. And, if you're, there's just a different sensibility to it. And the new stuff's great too. There's a huge revival in RPGs and board games and good, there's just different sensibilities, but yeah, I'm definitely old school at heart. And we will talk about that. The main topic today is going to be OSR Gaming, which is either, depending on who you're talking to, old school revival or old school renaissance. I always, until I went and looked it up, I thought it meant old school rules, OSR, but it's, I guess it's old school revival or old school renaissance. But it's appealing to people who either started playing that way and love that type of play, and you have people you have movie buffs now who love old black and white movies, even though they weren't alive when the black and white movies came out. So modern players, there's probably I would imagine a portion of modern players who can appreciate, the older style gaming in the same way we can appreciate older media, even if maybe that wasn't the context of our times or whatever.
Yeah, I am actually in that camp.
Okay, are you? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I want to. Yeah, we'll get into how you got drawn. I got drawn in because that's how I started. But later in the show, we'll get into how you and Carl got drawn into the point where you actually flap your lips about it for fun and possibly profit at least once a month. So I do want to. If I don't banter with Zach, my engineer, at least once a show, then we have a news team, and Sal, the lead guy of our news team who has a fedora and chomps a cigar, his grandmother and her dog Muffin listen to the show every week. And if I don't banter with Zach, Sal's grandmother and Muffin get upset. So Zach, what's going on, man?
What's up?
Man, I'm going to tell you what's up. I'm hearing nothing but good stuff about Blade Runner 2049.
It was a great movie.
Which surprises me because I was like, we don't need this sequel.
I remember that.
Leave it alone.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't seen it yet, but I hear nothing nothing but good stuff about it.
Yeah, it's a great movie.
So,
it's a great story too.
Yeah,
I enjoyed the movie more so than the original. I did.
Okay, so now you just hurt my feelings.
I'm just sorry.
Okay. Carl and Chrispy, Zach is my geek Padawan, who I have to shepherd along, and sometimes I have to teach him in the true ways of the geeky arts, not what the modern times are telling him is geeky. This hurts me, Zach. Have either of you guys seen it?
No, not yet.
The new Blade Runner?
Yeah,
Not yet.
Not yet. I want to. You know, the first Blade Runner was really kind of a commercial failure.
Yeah.
But then it became a cult hit after that. So,
Okay.
in this Blade Runner, even though it's getting amazing word of mouth, is not just killing it at the box office.
Right.
So
I had a friend post about that. He on Facebook. He's like, "Yeah, new Blade Runner is kind of going the same way as the original movie."
it'll have
And so
legs on video.
People to go see.
Yeah, it'll have legs on DVD and video and all that. I hear nothing but spectacular stuff about it. But enough about Blade Runner. Zach, are you watching? It's the week where our new geeky comic book TV shows are exploding back onto the scene. All I've seen so far is Gotham, The Gifted, Supergirl, and Flash. That's all I've caught up on. And Humans. What are you watching?
Same episodes, but I haven't seen Arrow from last night or Thursday night.
Yeah, for whatever reason, I don't get an Arrow. I need to catch up with Legends of Tomorrow. I've been watching the Orville. I love me some Orville. Big time on the Orville. We're gonna have a show pretty soon with people who both love and hate Star Trek Discovery. So that's gonna be fun. We're doing that pretty soon. But anyway, yeah, I got to say, and then I'm going to move us on because I want to make sure that Carl and Chrispy get plenty of time. I was kind of disappointed with the Flash premiere because I felt like it was kind of lazy. They set up this major stuff in the season finale last year.
Yep.
And then they just way too tidy. Way too tidy. It was like lazy, and it's like they didn't want to deal with it.
I totally agree. Just basically in the first episode, he's
like,
back.
He's back. And yeah.
Really?
So, yeah, really? I did like Beautiful. I wish they would have left Beautiful Mind Flash, who only when Iris is in danger suddenly turns into himself.
Yeah.
I kind of liked that. But anyway, Carl, Chrispy, do y'all watch any geeky TV shows right now?
My wife
I
and I
am
are.
a gigantic The Flash fan.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the newest episode yet.
Oh,
but
sorry.
I have lots of Flash opinions, and it sounds like they're doing the same thing they did last season.
All right. Well, everything we just said, we totally made up just to troll you.
All right.
What about you, Carl?
My wife and I are still trying to catch up on Game of Thrones. Like we're at season 4. So,
Yeah.
no,
Really
I'm behind.
good.
All right,
Really good.
Well, we want my wife, me and my wife, we watch Supergirl and Flash. That's the show she likes. I watch a ton of other stuff. The Inhumans is not as bad. Everyone's like, it's the worst show. It's not the best show on TV, but it's not anywhere near as bad. And the dude who's playing Black Bolt, I'm all about that. You know how hard that is to act without being able to talk?
Right.
He does a really good job. But anyway, we're not here. We're talking about old school. Old school. One last thing. I want to. I got some feedback, Zach, from a listener. This is actually on YouTube. I think they posted this on the Frank Mincer show. And this is from Nagatsu-san. They said, "Nice show, but it's a shame the constraints of commercial radio, limits the interviews." And I agree. As I was talking about with Carl before the show, radio's a trade-off. On one hand, you get the discoverability of. I mean, we're broadcasting out to a metro area of 700,000 people, so you got the discoverability of people just flipping the dial in their cars, which people still do, that you don't get from a podcast. But on the flip side, you have limits on like how long you can talk and this, that, and the other. Now, one thing I will say, and again, folks, if I have a Patreon for this show, but I'm not like either Patreon or I'm going away. That's not the case. But the more Patreon I get, the less commercials I have to run. And I can tell you that because radio has overhead that a podcast doesn't. I've got to have sponsors or Patreon to help cover that. So, if you like the show, but you want less commercials, and I think I only run about 4 minutes of commercials for an almost hour show. That's really not that bad. But if you want less commercials and more with my interviewers or interviewees, consider supporting the Patreon. But again, we don't have to do that. I don't want people to think that they have to do the Patreon in order to, listen to the show. So, and I'll shut up on that now. Okay. Speaking of the newsroom, speaking of Sal and his grandmother and her dog Muffin, why don't you turn on the microphone in the super secret newsroom there, Zach? There they go. There's Sal. I hope your mom's happy this week, or grandma's happy this week, Sal. I bantered with Zach. Okay, so Carl and Chrispy, I sent you guys a news article where somebody took, and it's called, "Is Your D&D Character Rare?" And it's from, and this ties in nicely because this fits OSR Gaming and modern gaming. So this is a nice news article to fit in. It's on 538.com, which I'm not familiar with 538 up until this article. But they seem to have, a wide range of types of news. But what somebody did is there's a new online app out there. I think it's just website only right now. It may have a companion phone app. I'm not sure, but it's called D&D Beyond, and you can create and track your characters, and it's a reference for spells and this and that and the other. And it's an official product from Wizards of the Coast. What somebody did was, now that it's been out for a few months, both in beta and live, they took the numbers and crunched the class race combos that people are making to see what is the most popular and what is the least popular. And I thought it was pretty interesting. So we'll get to some of the results here in a second and then get to a break. But people can just it'll be on the show notes, or just go to 538.com or search for "Is Your D&D Character Rare?" This thing's really making the rounds. It caught a lot of people's attention. I just want to, Chrispy, were the results surprising on this to you?
The results are really misleading.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So
expound on that.
D&D Beyond works is that it's basically, it's the web tools version of D&D that they've been promising forever. When you get into the rarer categories like the Azamar or even like the Goliath or the Aarakocra, I believe that those are only available through extra supplements. So like you would have to buy like the Sword Coast Adventures
so in order to use that on
Monsters.
D&D Beyond. Okay, well, no, that does skew the results. Okay, so so I'm going to deal with good data here. Let's jettison those results like Goliath and just look at the classic fighter, or human, dwarf, elf. Even though in OSR Gaming, elf was its own class and dwarf was its own class, but just debate where those results. Like, I was not surprised at all that human fighter was the most common.
Oh no, elf ranger also is very, like, of course,
right. But yeah, that is a very good point. What about you, Carl? Was this interesting to you at all to take a look at?
Well, I think one thing we can look at, again, what Chrispy was saying is only the races in the player's handbook do you get with your base package, and you pay more for the others. So we can still look at stuff like Dragonborn and Tiefling, which did not exist in any really pre-2000 publication D&D that I'm aware of. Certainly as playable characters, and see that there is still a trend towards more
vanilla
humanic characters, characters that you can relate to. I'm a little surprised that dwarf is higher than elf in fighter. I guess that's just in fighter though.
Yeah, that would be in fighter. Yeah, it's kind of an interesting, people, you really need to go look at this chart to understand what we're talking about. But so go look for "Is Your D&D Character Rare?" I think my very first character back in the day was a human fighter named Barak that was actually just, there was the Sleeping Dragon book where some guys from the real world and people from the real world got translated over into their D&D world, basically. So I was like, I'm going to make that character. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I had an elf wizard and a human fighter were like my original players.
The Three Little Brown Books, original box set D&D, 1974, has a paragraph that says, if a player wants to play a dragon, that's fine. Let them play a dragon. They just have to start off weak enough to where they match the other player characters.
So they're basically an egg.
So, right. But I mean, the point being is these kind of far out there characters, those existed in old school D&D. They just weren't codified in the rules.
Right.
You would have to modify to get there. But people were playing out there characters from before D&D was published. We were talking on our podcast about clerics a while back, and the cleric was invented to combat a vampire player character. So people were playing out their races for the entire history of D&D.
Right.
They just weren't codified into the main box of the rules.
Okay.
So that
and
just
I'm pretty
changed.
sure that there's something floating around somewhere where a player was playing a Balrog.
Nice.
I know I've seen that. I mean, I can try to find it, but that'll take forever.
His name is Jim.
Yeah, Jim. So, well, that speaks to the strength of tabletop role-playing games as opposed to like a computer role-playing game. Truly, if the DM and the player are cool with it, you can do anything you want. Anything. You know, that is still one of the strengths of tabletop role-playing games. Because for a computer game, you have to think about it ahead of time and program the ability to do that. You know, and so a lot of people are like, why should I play tabletop role-playing games? I love to play, you know, Baldur's Gate or The Witcher or whatever. It's like, it's just a different experience, and it's a different social experience as well. So, yes. Yeah, it sounded like somebody was going to say something. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, Eric Mona actually, the publisher for Paizo for Pathfinder, actually wrote an article about that for EN World, about the choices that exist in D&D and specifically in Fallout 3 when you're given the choice. Spoilers for this like 13-year-old game, I guess.
Yeah, spoil. You can go ahead and spoil.
Yeah, you're to get your first player house. You're given a quest where you can either detonate the nuclear warhead in Megaton or turn in the guy who's trying to get you to
Detonate it.
To explode it. And either way, you get a house. If you blow it up, you get a really sweet house in really bougie like isolationist high-rise apartments.
Right.
If you save the city, you know, you get like a shack. So, I mean, which one sounds better?
Right. Well, here's the thing. The dirty little secret about me is in real life, I'm chaotic good, probably, maybe even trending over to lawful good at times. In games, I'm blowing the nuke up. I'm just saying.
I blew the nuke up as well.
You know, I mean, anytime I play Civ, I play it up to the point where I can launch a nuke, and then I lose interest. So I'm just saying. Anyway, Crispy, I interrupted you. What were you saying?
Yeah. So Mono wrote about, he's like, well, you know, and I like some of the people in there, but I want the really sweet house.
Right.
I wish there was a way I could go and like tell the people who I want to save that I'm about to blow up the nuke and get them away from the town into a safe distance so they still live. But all the other like nobody NPCs who don't do anything or have any real interaction, you can blow them away. And in D&D, you can do that. You can go and like I know we're being broadcast simultaneously on a Christian radio station.
Yeah,
I had a thing that I wanted to say for this kind of thing.
Let's be considerate to them and also the FCC rules. So, but I mean, you can still say what you want. I mean, you know, they go ahead and say what you want. Just be circumspect and polite about it.
I had talked with a friend about this thing about GTA, right? In GTA, there are night walkers, I guess, painted ladies.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. Well, it is the world's oldest profession. And, you know, so yeah, we know that they exist. Yeah, go ahead.
And, you know, you can only do a couple things, very violent sociopathic things in that game. Whereas in D&D, if you're presented with that situation, you can pretty woman her. Right. You could try to, help her. The difference between computer role-playing games and tabletop role.
Yeah. And I got to be honest, it's because of that kind of thing that even though I like to get a little crazy, I don't play GTA because I know that there's just all kinds of stuff like that in there, but other people do. And that's their ballyhoo. And, you know, I'm not here to tell them that they can't, because GTA is an amazing open world engine, and I'll give it that. But some of the stuff you can do in there, I'm like, really? So let me wrap up. Let me wrap up the news thing, and then we're going to talk about Arkansas RPG Con and get to a break. So the most popular combo, according to this thing, is, and this doesn't surprise me at all, is the fighter human. That's the most popular combo. Now, class wise, you go fighter, rogue, wizard, barbarian, cleric, ranger, paladin, and it goes warlock, monk, and it goes down and down. And then it goes,
acrobat.
Yeah, thief, acrobat. Cavalier. And then on the races, it goes human, elf, half elf, dwarf, dragonborn, tiefling, genasi, halfling, etc. I like a good halfling thief rogue, whatever you want to call it. I like a good human fighter. I like a good dwarf fighter. And I like to multi-class too. This doesn't take any multi-classing into account. But and then the least popular is the Aasimar Druid. So there you go. Go check it out further. Any final thoughts on that somewhat skewed data?
Well, the data still makes sense for if you look at fantasy archetypes that have existed in D&D. So human fighter, elf wizard, or elf ranger. That's kind of an older thing. But, dwarf cleric is the most popular dwarf. Halfling rogue is the most popular halfling. So it makes sense that these kind of like stereotypes from literature, I guess is kind of what I want to say, would be the most popular choices.
Yeah. Yep. And what's ironic is in the original D&D, at least not the 3 booklets that Carl mentioned, but in the expert and basic from Moldvay, you couldn't be a human wizard with a sword, which is one of the most classic archetypes ever. Gandalf, you couldn't do that. You literally could. You could be an elf. Yeah, you can be Elric. So anyway, we'll get more into that after the break, more into what, some of the OSR stuff. Want to talk real quick before we get to the break. We've been promoting this on the show for weeks now. Next weekend, Saturday, October 24th at the Gene Moss Building in Benton, Arkansas, from I think 9 in the morning till 10 at night, is the Arkansas RPG Con.
That's right.
And so Carl, let it rip.
Yes. This is 913 East Sevier Street in Benton, the Gene Moss Building at Tyndall Park. Doors are open at 9. Gaming is going to start at 10 for the most part. We are going to have Dungeons and Dragons, New School and Old School, Pathfinder, Dread, which is a horror RPG where you use a Jenga tower, Call of Cthulhu, Dungeon Crawl Classic, Swords and Wizardry, Mutants and Masterminds, tons and tons of games running all day. We're going to have on-site concessions. Those are going to be cash only. We're going to have prize drawings. We're going to have vendor booths. Game Goblins is going to be there. Archangel Games is going to be there. Ravel and Frog, Dark Naga Adventures, Crypt Machines. Illusion Magazine is going to be there. They're distributors of blind boxes where you get monthly prize boxes. They have Myth Horde and Cthulhu Crate and Tenkar's Tavern Crate. And admission today is the last day to get the early bird pricing of $7. Tomorrow that's going to go up to $10. So it's real cheap to come play games and come by and see us.
Yeah, and tell us again where the Gene Moss Building is.
913 East Sevier Street in Benton, Arkansas. And there are other directions that street goes. Don't go those. It's east.
Is there any landmarks that's near any? That's the most common question I've had is where's the Gene Moss
Building?
Building?
At the corner of Tyndall. I mean, Tyndall Park is probably the only real landmark I have to put you there.
Well, if you're going north on 30, you're going to exit left, right?
Right.
Right.
Yeah,
you're going to be on the left side or the west side of 30.
No. If you're going 30, west, if you're going to 30 from Little Rock,
right,
you're gonna go over the overpass.
Right. So you're gonna cross back over.
Right.
Right. Okay. All right. I probably just confused it more than I helped it.
Oh no.
So I'm really looking forward to this. There's a lot of games there. There's a lot of OSR gaming that I'm looking forward to, like Dungeon Crawl Classics. I really want to check that out. I've never had a chance. And there's a lot of other really cool games. Now there's a slight possibility. It may happen, it may not. But if anybody that listens to the show also watches Hal Reroll on Twitch, DM Gorbad has reached out and expressed possible interest in coming if he can get away. So, don't come and go, hey, where's DM Gorbad? We don't know yet, but it's possible that Gorbad may be there. So I know that Carl and Gorbad are talking a little bit by email and whatever. So we'll see if that happens. Also, one of the questions I've seen is, what about food? I know there's some like prepackaged kind of snack stuff.
We can only sell prepackaged concessions. So that'll be chips, drinks, but that's going to include, we're going to get some of the pre-made like Smucker's peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and stuff like that. So we're going to have some sort of meal options. The reason it's cash only is just to keep the cost down. We want to make concessions as cheap as possible for everybody. And running cards is not a cheap option.
Sure. Yeah.
But there is restaurants nearby, and you can get delivery there or bring your own food. That's all fine.
Yeah. And if you're not familiar with Arkansas, we even got outhouses now in that internet thing. We got the internet last week, and our outhouses, they just put new doors on and a coat of paint. Guys, you will not believe this. When I was in the military. This is in the 90s. Dude was like, where are you from? I was like, Little Rock, Arkansas. He's like, dude, that's so good. You overcame your surrounding. I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm a city boy. Anyway, just had to throw that in. So it is civilization. So come on in and check it out and let's have some fun. Chrispy, I'm going to guess since you're in Vegas, you're not going to make it.
No, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, I
have a conflicting convention to go to.
I'll reserve an outhouse just for you, just in case you can make it in.
I thought you were going like, we have outhouses and Wi-Fi. I thought you were like, our outhouses are Wi-Fi enabled.
Well, oh yeah, that too. Well, that's what I meant. Yeah, we got 2,600 baud modems in our outhouses now.
Only in the big cities.
Only in the big cities.
It's still dial up out the country.
Yeah, exactly. So okay, I got to get us to a break. But folks, and what's the website real quick, Carl?
It's arpgcon.com.
.com and you can also search for Arkansas RPG Con on Facebook. I'm going to take us to a break, and when we come back, we'll have more with DM Carl and DM Chrispy of the Save or Die podcast, and we're going to talk a little bit about OSR Gaming.
The smell of mildew emanates from wet stone walls. The only choices before you are to enter the door to the north or travel back up the stairs from whence you came.
Okay. I go to the door to the north.
In this room you encounter an event promoter.
Arkansas RPG Con is the Arkansas convention for all tabletop role-playing games. Arkansas RPG Con will be held on Saturday, October 21st at the Gene Moss Building, located at 913 East Sevier Street in Benton, Arkansas. Early bird tickets are just $7, so visit arpgcon.com for all the details about Arkansas RPG Con.
Okay. Well, I guess I go to Arkansas RPG Con.
Yeah, that does sound pretty fun.
Comic book lovers, visit thewildstars.com today. From the mind of author and comic book industry expert Michael Tierney, it's not just a comic book, it's a comic book novel. The Wild Stars is sci-fi and so much more. Learn the explanations behind UFOs and space gods. This isn't the Twilight Zone. This is the region of the Milky Way galaxy known as the Wild Stars. We guarantee you've never read anything like it. The complete comic book novel took 20 years to tell, with one reviewer noting, the story of the Wild Stars stretches ambitiously across space and time, from small-town murders to the destruction of planets, with every event given multiple layers of meaning. If you haven't read The Wild Stars, you're missing out. Visit thewildstars.com today.
The die is cast.
Plunge into worlds of fantastic adventure where dragons lie and the undead stalk the shades of your mind's imagines. Where creatures of legend plunder wealth through the horror of their passage. Monsters grim and foul hold the ecstasy of gold and the renown of glory. All this and more awaits you and your friends in the unlimited, fantastic world of the Castles and Crusades role-playing game from Trollord Games. Visit your friendly local game store or trollord.com to get your copy today. A rules-light, adaptable game that has stood the test of time. 12 years in constant publication with no new additions, Castles and Crusades is the original easy-to-play attribute check system. Join us and unleash your imagination. Visit your friendly local game store or trollord.com to get your copy of Castles and Crusades today. Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.
Hey, we're back on Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm joined by DM Carl and DM Chrispy of the Save or Die podcast, which is a old school D&D podcast. We're talking about old school gaming today. If you're listening on 99.5 and you're like, what the heck is Shane Plays Geek Talk? Again, we're temporarily on 99.5 through November 11th due to Ouachita Baptist Sports Ball, but we just happen to be simulcasting on 96.5 and 99.5 today. Folks, if you want to call in, it's 501-823-0965, or you can tweet me at Shane Plays, and I'll be happy to work any of your questions or comments in. And Carl and Chrispy, if anybody reaches out to you with questions or comments, feel free to bring them into the show. I like to make the show interactive when possible. So we've talked about D&D character class combos. We've talked about Arkansas RPG Con. I made loving fun of my home state of Arkansas, which is near and dear to my heart. And now we're going to talk about what is OSR. OSR Gaming is, depending on who you ask, it's either the old school revival or old school renaissance, or in my mind, I thought it was old school rules. It's basically playing either games that are from the 80s or whatever, or games that try to capture that spirit. So let me give you an example here. A month or two ago, Carl and I were up at an adult game night at Game Goblins, and that doesn't mean that it's like debauchery and it's an adult. It just means that it's a night. Just, you can come in and it's, I think you have to be 18 or older to come in or whatever, but it's just people playing games, and it stays open late. I think that's really the adult thing about it.
Right.
And Carl ran a game of Moldvay D&D, which was the blue and red. The red was
the
based
magenta box.
Yeah,
That's
the
what people
magenta
call it.
box.
It's purple.
Yeah, and we played that, and so we were just playing those rules. And in those rules, that's old school, man. I mean, it's like, you could only go up to like third level in the basic, and you had to buy the expert to go up above that. And there was you couldn't be a dwarf fighter. You could be a dwarf. That was your class. Or you can be an elf wizard. You could be an elf. That if you wanted to cast spells and carry a sword, you had to be an elf. That kind of thing. Now, that's old school because you're literally playing an old school game.
Right.
The other type of game, and more of these are coming along, are games that have more, let's say, modern rules systems, but to try to capture or evoke the spirit of old school games. And one of the best known examples, and also somebody, they happen to be a sponsor of the show, is Castles and Crusades from Trollord Games. Mm-hmm. And then you've got like Dungeon Crawl Classics, you have Swords and Wizardry, that sort of thing. So having introduced that, I want to kind of hand it off to Carl, and then we'll let Chrispy put in. What do you think of as old school gaming, Carl?
Well, I think it's easier to trace old school gaming when we're specifically talking about Dungeons and Dragons.
Okay,
and I say that because there's lots of old school games, 70s games, early 80s games that were complex and did have lots of rules.
For example,
chivalry and sorcery.
Well, you also had Iron Crown Enterprises. They had like the roll master and all that stuff.
Yeah.
That was
roll
pretty,
master.
Yeah,
roll
that stuff was pretty complex. Yeah,
Right.
Chart master.
Chartmaster, yeah.
Yeah, Chartmaster.
It's like Mathfinder, except for the 70s and early 80s.
Yeah.
But when we're talking specifically about Dungeons and Dragons, we have two types, like you mentioned, people who either play the original Dungeons and Dragons rule sets from the 80s, early 90s, and 70s. Those are all kind of lumped into old school. Everybody kind of has their own personal cutoff. Mm-hmm. For me, I think of it as kind of 10 years of its existence. 74 to 84 is where I feel it's really old school. I see a lot of changes in the industry after that point.
Now, to give people an idea, when did Redbox come out?
83.
Okay, so you see that as the final, or that's a good dividing line?
I do, because I feel like Redbox has just as much polish as any system that we have today. I mean, it's a really slick product.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I think
Beckme
it really,
or Redbox D&D can get as complex as more complex than AD&D.
right.
Well, and so many people cut their teeth on Redbox. I wasn't one of them. I owned Redbox, but Redbox was like a lot of people, like their parents bought it for them at Christmas, and that was their, what is this? And Frank Mincer almost kind of scolded me last week because I kept going the Frank Mincer, and he's like, let's get down off that high horse. So he just sees himself as just another gamer,
He's just a Frank Mincer.
Yeah, he's just a Frank Mincer. But, I mean, that's the Redbox is huge for a lot of people.
And it was huge for TSR. It went everywhere. There's Norwegian and Chinese and French and all sorts of different language editions of the Red Box. It was the first global mass market RPG.
Right.
So again, that's another reason why I see that kind of as the mold for what we now see as modern RPGs. But there's nothing wrong with AD&D 2E and Rule Cyclopedia, which is an extension of the Red Box. Those are definitely part of the OSR as well. So what we're talking about is the original games and then what we call retro clones or simulacrum. And what these are rule sets either designed to match very closely to the original editions. Swords and Wizardry is matching OD&D. Osric is matching Advanced Dungeons and Dragons, and Labyrinth Lord is matching Basic Dungeons and Dragons. And that's just hearsay. I don't speak for any of those companies, so sue me.
Right.
And
well, it's just obvious looking at it that they fit, right? I mean, you know,
and that's made possible by the Open Gaming license. Without the 3rd edition Open Gaming license, we wouldn't have an OSR.
Say that again?
Without the 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, where they did the OGL, right?
Where they have the OGL, which is the Open Gaming license. That is intended to let people make supplementary products.
Well, and that's where we got Castles and Crusades.
And yes, and Castles and Crusades, Trollord Games, here in Arkansas, were the first people to take the steps to make their own game using the OGL, or one of the first for sure. Osric was also very early on. So these were pioneers of the OSR. Castles and Crusades is near and dear to my heart because it's the first game I went to when I got back into gaming. I was out of gaming, all kinds of gaming, for 5 years or so. And it's the first game I played with my wife, and I still love it today.
Nice. All right, Chrispy, what about you? What are your thoughts on what is OSR? Like, what, you know, if you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, like, well, Carl's right on the money with that. Like, you have kind of touching more on the simulacrum. So you have like Lamentations of the Flame Princess or BFRPG, games that aren't explicitly clones of a type of rule set, but emulate that feel. I would say Castles and Crusades is a simulacrum,
right? Yes.
Rather than it's not a retro clone. It's not a clone of that,
right?
For me, I think old school gaming is a mindset, but I do like Carl's like 10-year cutoff. Actually, I've never looked at it that way, and I think that's a really good like rule of thumb.
Okay.
So anything before 2nd edition.
All right. Okay. Good. I mean that's fine. You know, you always have watermarks in history, and you go back and say this was before and this is after. So let's just say 2nd edition. Why not?
Yeah. Well,
just for the purposes of this
change
conversation
in the industry that he's alluding to is kind of what led into 2nd edition, actually. But yeah, for me, it's. I think of modern games, or I don't know if this is a perfect analogy, but I think of it more of playing The Lord of the Rings versus playing The Hobbit. Old school games are The Hobbit to me.
Okay.
Where you're playing in archetypes and you're playing in a more low fantasy, kind of low powered setting where you're just kind of scraping by the skin of your teeth all the time.
Right. And the stakes aren't as epic either in The Hobbit.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. All right. We can go with that. You know, here, I'm going to run down, this is from Wikipedia, so your mileage may vary on how accurate this is. You know, I looked up Dungeons & Dragons retro clones, and here's the games they listed. They listed Osric, of course, which is that's some weird old school reference and index compilation, which is roughly analogous to AD&D. Labyrinth Lord, Basic Fantasy RPG, Swords and Wizardry. Now, Carl, don't you run Swords and Wizardry for kids? Is that the game that you run for kids?
Yes, I run Swords and Wizardry, which is Swords and Wizardry Lite, which is a very streamlined version of the Swords and Wizardry white box.
Yeah.
It's a game that only uses a D20 and a D6.
Okay.
So that makes it very easy for new people.
Okay. Then we got Dark Dungeons. Now, are they making fun of the Jack Chick track with that name?
Yes, they definitely are.
Yes.
That's a rule cyclopedia.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. If people don't know, if you've ever seen This Is Your Life, which is a famous religious tract, the same guy put out one called Dark Dungeons, and it's become very famous and infamous in role playing. Mazes and Perils,
which is actually written by our producer Vince Florio.
Oh, cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
The show creator.
Oh, excellent.
Vince Florio.
So he wrote that. All right.
Mm-hmm.
For Golden Glory. Go ahead.
Mazes and Perils is the Holmes box set.
Which is a play on the John Eric Holmes, who wrote the Holmes Basic, which was the first simplified, streamlined version of D&D.
The genesis of basic D&D, as we know it.
He laid the kind of the groundwork for what we call race as class, where you play a dwarf or a fighter. You don't play a dwarven fighter.
Right.
He wrote a book called Maze of Peril, which is where that name gets its inspiration from.
Gotcha.
It's
Okay.
a great name.
Cool. Mazes and Perils. For Golden Glory, and then Blue Holme, Holme. I guess that's also a play on Holmes.
Also based on Holmes Basic.
Yeah. And then we got, now here's some stuff they didn't put, and they're not retro clones, so I'm guessing that's why it wasn't on the list. Of course, you got Castles and Crusades.
Right.
Now, is Dungeon Crawl Classics, is that not a retro clone?
I wouldn't call it a retro
simulacrum.
clone. I would call it a simulacrum.
I'm interested in playing that. You know, they've done a great job of getting like classic artists like Errol Otis and stuff like that, and kind of evoking the feel. And this is not a retro clone, but I think a game that gets left off the list of OSR or whatever a lot is Tunnels and Trolls, because you know, Tunnels and Trolls is actually a pretty neat little system. It was supposed to be kind of a rules light fun.
Second RPG ever created. That's their claim to fame.
Their claim to fame?
Yeah. D&D was complex, and you had to traverse through it to try to figure it out. It referenced other books you may or may not have had.
A whole other game.
Yes.
Right. All right.
But Tunnels and Trolls just uses D6s. Everybody has them around their house. It's a way to get into the game really fast, and it has a huge fan base, and it's fantastic.
Well, people need to. There's an app now. It's called Meta Arcade. That's the name of it, and it lets you build your own RPG adventures. But there's a lot of prepackaged Tunnels and Trolls adventures, and they're a lot of fun. So
that's another thing that Tunnels and Trolls really pioneered to make RPGs more accessible. Is they made solo adventures where the adventure itself would act as the game master,
which I like that, because a lot at various times in my role-playing history, I didn't have anybody to play with.
Sure.
I was reading all the books, but I didn't get to play, you know, so I love that. Guys, I got to get us another break. It is radio. I'm going to make this one. I've already cut a couple out just to give y'all more time because they're repeats. But I do want to throw some love at Game Goblins. Some goblins are your friends. Game Goblins is Central Arkansas's premier retailer. Magic the Gathering, Warhammer 40K, board games, card games, RPGs, miniatures, and hobby accessories. Call Game Goblins at 501-224-GAME or visit them online at gamegoblins.com. For all of your gaming needs, I heartily recommend Game Goblins. Make sure to check out their customer loyalty program that rewards you based on your actual purchases. Game Goblins earns your business and keeps it. First-time customers, mention Shane Plays and receive $10 off your purchase of $50 or more. Tell them Shane Plays sent you. Hey, we're back on Shane Plays Geek Talk, a journey into the things we love. I'm your host, Shane Stacks. Again, if you're listening and we're on 99.5, it's a temporary station change due to Ouachita Baptist Sports Ball through November 11th. But today we're simulcasting on 96.5 and 99.5. I'm joined by DM Carl and DM Chrispy of the Save or Die podcast. Guys, here's what I'm going to do. We got 5 or 6 minutes left. I want to give people a taste of your podcast. So I'm going to kind of back off here for about 5 minutes. And I want you to talk as if you're on your podcast, and somebody has sent you a question that says, I keep hearing you guys talk about OSR. I love D&D 5e, but I'm open to other stuff. Why should I check out OSR? And what would be a good one to start with? So you guys take it for like the next 5 minutes, and then I'll bring us back in. So go ahead.
Carl, I mean, what do you think with this? I have thoughts, especially if they're only playing 5th edition, but like,
well,
I think you have a lot more experience than I do.
Yeah, if they're playing 5th edition, they've already taken the first steps. 5th edition does a lot to push the language back to old school role playing, and a lot of that language was changed with 4th edition. So, in a way, 5th edition is an example of the success of the OSR because it was seen and emulated by Dungeons and Dragons, the main entity. But what 5th edition lacks, in my opinion, and what I like about OSR is allowing for a dichotomy of play styles. And to me, that's what's great about old school role playing is that a fighter does not run like a wizard. They don't have powers. They don't have things to keep up with. They don't have daily abilities. So if your play style is I just want to hear the story, fight some things, contribute that way, but I don't want to keep up with a lot of bookkeeping. You can play a fighter and have a completely separate play style from somebody that wants to keep up with lists of spells. And those are both fine play styles to have. But with modern games, you're keeping up with lists and powers regardless of what type of character you play. The other thing it doesn't allow for is really gritty low-level play. You can run old school D&D at higher levels and get kind of a first level experience that you would have out of modern RPGs. But you cannot run a modern RPG and get an old school, really gritty. You're going to die because that goblin has a knife, and that's all it takes. Experience.
Yeah, I ran X1 for some people a few years ago, and we only had 3 players. So instead of giving higher leagues and things like that, I just wanted to play. So I made everyone 8th level.
Yeah.
It's like, all right, there's only 3 of you. I'm going to make you just really, really strong to go through this. And the first fight, they ended up fighting some giant spiders, and the cleric of the group failed her save versus poison and died.
Right.
So even at 8th level, God, what is that? That's how many dozens of thousands of experience points?
Sure.
That's the other thing is it's so easy to make high level characters in old school D&D. It's great. But yeah, so she failed and she died, and I was like, all right, well, I don't want to kill you, so it does a lot of damage and you're fine. But yeah, I would say a good starting place for if you want to get into old school D&D is, I know we are the classic Dungeons and Dragons podcast, but I would always say start with BX, specifically start with Labyrinth Lord. I think it's got a good layout. You're not dealing with a lot of weird fiddly bits. Like you still have your turn or like tracking and things like that, but that's hand waveable. It's +1, +2, +3 for ability scores. You're usually rolling a d20 for most things. If you're not, you're rolling on a d6, and it gives you that real concentrated old school flavor. And then I would just pick that up and go on D&D Classics and buy a PDF copy of, I would say B2, but you could do B1, I guess.
By B1, you mean Keep on the Borderlands?
B1 is In Search of the Unknown. B2 is Keep on the Borderlands.
Okay, I gotta go ahead and start drawing us down. Those were good thoughts. Some thoughts that I had while you guys were talking are, in old school gaming, for the most part, there's some knuckle biting drama when it comes to the dice rolls. I mean, so if you can be kind of an easy come, easy go player, like you're not so attached to your special flower petal of a character that if that character dies, you're going to be distraught for weeks. If you could just be like, well, my character died, they had 3 hit points and they died in the very first encounter. But on the flip side, if you get a character to high level, you're like, wow, I really accomplished something.
Right.
OSR might be for you. Another thing that the OSR is much more role-based. Party balance is incredibly important in old school gaming. You need it.
I disagree with that.
Okay, well, unfortunately, I can't get into it right now. People, hopefully, maybe I don't know. What's the best way to follow up with you, Chrispy, if people want to get your elaboration?
You can email us at questions.saverdie.info.
Okay,
or saverdie. Yes, right. What's our email address?
At saveordie.info.
Okay, so if you want to know why Chrispy disagrees with me on that OSR is party balance is more important, questions at saveordie.info. Make sure to check out the Save or Die podcast. But another example of OSR, I played with Carl. My character found a magic sword, and the very next encounter, the rust monster dissolved my magic sword. So,
easy come,
easy go. All right, guys, I got to do this to you. It's the bad joke of the week. Why do cows wear bells?
Why?
Because their horns don't work. There we go. All right, bad joke of the week. Folks, this has been DM Carl and DM Chrispy, who are the co-hosts of the Save or Die podcast. Look them up. It is saveordie.info, right?
That's right.
It's once a month. Guys, thanks for being on. And folks, don't forget about Arkansas RPG Con next Saturday in Benton, Arkansas.
You've done a man's job, sir. I guess you're through, huh?
Finished.
It's too bad she won't live. But then again, who does?
Shane Plays Radio is blessed to have sponsors, and we appreciate them very much. However, did you know that you can also support the show as an individual for as little as $1 an episode? Simply go to patreon.com/ShanePlays.